appreciate you joining us today. I guess my first question that I just kind of got to get it out of the way. When we're talking about some of the comments you made last week, I know those kind of came up again. This weekend in Storm Lake when you were at your town hall meeting there. I guess you'd said that you'd like for some people in your party and to apologize for coming out against that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about why you're seeking that apology?
Well, in the first place, I was misquoted by the Des Moines Register. It was picked up by the AP, the misquote, and it was spread all over the country. You can't get them to retract a statement these days and fix it because it's all over the internet and you can't call it back. But they did retract the statement and reissued a more accurate statement. Good thing, because they had my whole speech on their website, and the website that they had, my voice contradicted what they wrote that I said. That started this controversy. And we're in this place apparently where society just simply can't handle factual truths or let alone any kind of provocative discussion. But what I said was completely objectively true. It's completely consistent with the Republican Party platform in Iowa and at the national level. And now I have Republicans at some of the highest levels coming out criticizing and attacking me for defending the very principles that are branded into our platform. And that means that they have taken on the positions that are contrary to the platform. I'm very, very confident because I'm completely consistent with all of my public statements, my activities. The heartbeat bill, which I moved in last Congress to 174 co-sponsors, strangely was killed by leadership in the last weeks of Congress. We had the votes to pass it out of committee and the votes to pass it off the floor without amendments, without exceptions for rape and incest. And my leadership killed it. That would be Kevin McCarthy, to some degree Steve Scalise, and also Liz Cheney. And so that tells me they are for exceptions. They don't like the platform. They reject the position in the platform. And I'm morally right, I'm theologically right, and I'm consistent with the platform in the Republican Party, and they are not. So when they attack me for defending our principles, they need to understand that they need to apologize to me.
And I just, to go back to this, retraction and misquote, like, what specifically were you saying that they misquoted you? Because I know that, because I pulled up the AP story because I was interested too, because I saw the video and everything like that and kind of watched it. And basically, are you saying that they kind of took it out of context, or is that?
Well, they did both. They misquoted me and alleged that I had blamed women for rape, which I did not do that in any way. In fact, none of my critics have as strong a record against rape as I have. I have voted consistently for the harshest penalties possible, more harsh than I'm even comfortable explaining here in this interview. And so everybody ought to know where I stand on that. But there are circumstances where there is incest. And in most circumstances, it's perpetrated by the man. But on those times when it's not, I use the language that said, because you don't abort the baby because of the sin of the father, and maybe sometimes the sin of the mother too. It makes an accommodation for that when there's a willing female involved in regard to incest. That's objectively true. It cannot be argued to the contrary in any rational way. Yet my critics were so eager to jump on me because they saw a national firestorm starting again over misinformation and misquotes. So.
I guess I'd kind of like to, along that same line, just kind of talk a little bit more about this upcoming election. I know this one seems a little different than I've covered a lot of your other elections and everything like that. Especially since you have like a really strong contender in Senator Feenstra right now. I know that he's raised quite a bit of money for this campaign, and some have said that that he might have a better chance of beating J.D. Schultz than you. So at this point, like in your campaign, like how are you guys approaching that? I know that you guys, are traditionally aren't really big spenders in campaigns, but how do you guys, compete against that this year?
Well, I haven't really run the numbers, but I would say that I probably have gathered more votes having invested less advertisement dollars in probably anybody in the history of Iowa congressional politics, at least in modern history would be a more accurate way to say that. And my critics that say because I won the past election by 3.4%, That's a greater margin than the governor in the broader statewide race did. Or, by the way, Ted Cruz, that got a lot of national press, he won by lesser margin than I did too. Nobody is saying, gee, we're worried about Governor Reynolds in our next election or Ted Cruz in his next election. Why are they worried about me? We lost 2 good Republican House members in Rod Blum and in David Young. And David Young's running again. Nobody is saying he can't win because he lost the last time, so why would anyone think I can't win because we won the last time? It's completely illogical. We were outspent 14-1 head-to-head. We were outspent 75-1 in independent expenditures. Whatever he spent on social media, we didn't actually have a presence on social media. They created a nearly perfect storm with a dishonest hit job, tens of millions of dollars of earned media against me, and still we held on with that, being outspent in that fashion after the chairman of the NRCC unloaded on me a week before and raised $1.5 million for my opponent in 1 week. You put all that up, if anybody logically looking at us, they'd say, wow, Steve King had a solid support base across this district, and that's why he was reelected. That certainly is the truth of it, and it appears to be the truth today. If you look at the Des Moines Register, if you look at the Secretary of State's straw poll down at the state fair, an electronic ballot where you could go down the line, and I voted for myself in that, so add that one up too. But we outpoint Randy Feenstra by nearly 2-1. When you add up the Republicans, they outpoint J.D. Schulten by nearly 2-1. Anybody looking at the objective data has to understand that there's some people out here that want cheap labor. They're open borders advocates. They have recruited Randy Feenstra to run. He's taking their money. There are establishment people that want to nominate an establishment candidate for president in the next cycle or two. They realize they can't do that because the core of the conservatives live in northwest Iowa, and until they can discredit me, there's going to be a conservative emerge in the Iowa caucus. Plus, these are the same people that killed the straw poll in the state of Iowa, and that includes Governor Branstad.
And I guess I'll kind of touch on that too. You talk about, some of the more national people kind of, getting involved in this campaign as well. Just to be frank with you, like the positions about the heartbeat bill, the positions about rape and incest, a lot of these positions are positions you've held for years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these aren't really anything new. This is something that, like that. It's pretty much the positions you've had. I guess my question would be is, why do you think that, like, this stuff has come up in the last 2 years? You being stripped of your committee assignments, all this stuff. Like, why do you feel that they're kind of attacking you, more or less?
Well, Diamond and Silk put it this way. They asked this question. They said, who called the hit? They understood that this is not an organic thing that grew out of any comment or even a misquote. It was planned. It was planned and choreographed. I got a heads up before Christmas that they were going to make a run at me as soon as they could, and they did that in January. Now they're making another run at me. They think somehow they can create enough furor in the media around the country that's the only way that they can beat me, because we think a lot the same here, especially in northwest Iowa. We are constitutional, principled Christian conservatives. And if you hold to those values that I have for more than 2 decades, I say to people straight out, I've never let you down. And they know that. And that's the strongest point. So the biggest reasons are, they want to nominate an establishment candidate for president in this upcoming, or more likely a future, maybe 2024, and they want me out of the way for that. That's the biggest reason. The other thing is, we have some employers that want cheap labor, and they have constantly lobbied me to promote amnesty and open borders, and I've constantly said, we need to secure the border, restore the rule of law. So of all of the people that I deal with in politics, almost all of them, the elected officials, almost all of them are political barometers. They only want to deal with how it affects them politically. Hardly any of them even want to look to the horizon. And I want to look not just to the horizon on principle, but over the horizon, and I want to be able to see, where is America going if we adopt these policies today? That's why I have been so far-reaching in many of the policies I've advocated. I said build a wall clear back in 2003 or 4. I built one on the floor in about 2005 to show them how easy it was. I introduced the Birthright Citizenship Act that blocks automatic citizenship to babies born to illegals in America. I introduced the New Idea Act, which eliminates the tax deductibility of wages and benefits paid to illegals. I brought the pro-life legislation. I brought the repeal of Obamacare legislation. I've been one of the strongest proponents for the Second Amendment. I put the earmark in place marketplace that opened up the door for a 4-lane Highway 20. They still wouldn't have cut the ribbon on that if I hadn't done that. Those are all things that look downrange. And for example, the renewable fuels situation as well. I laid the first legislation down that provided a small ethanol producer's credit and laid the foundation for biodiesel too. Today, we're the #1 renewable energy producing congressional district in all of America. I didn't think of all that, but I saw into the future on what we needed to do at the time to be prepared when the opportunity came. I've done that time after time. People in this district know that.
You mentioned the renewable fuel standard. That is not going well right now.
You're right. It's not going well right now.
They just recently closed an ethanol plant right here in Sioux.
Plymouth.
Yeah. Where are you guys at on that, trying to get that whole situation squared?
Well, I went in to see the president on year-round E15, and I believe I was the last person to take the issue to him before he approved it. That was on a Tuesday. 10 minutes into that conversation, I was confident he was going to issue the order to the EPA to open the door. They did. 2 days later, they made the announcement. So within 48 hours of my discussion with him. So I've been a strong supporter for this all along. I go back into the late 70s with renewable energy. But what are we doing about it? Each time we get something out of the executive branch that gives us an opportunity to compete in the marketplace with renewable energy, then it looks like there's an offset that goes to the petroleum industry. And I take issue with that. I'm not trying to bring a vote to the floor of the House because the petroleum lobby is powerful, and I think that could hurt us. But I did introduce 2 pieces of legislation to deal with these RIN waivers that they're granting. Now, they got 4 or 5 RIN waivers came out. The waivers that say to small refineries, you don't have to blend ethanol because it's inconvenient for you. About 5 of those came out within 2 days of the time we got the notice on year-round E15, and I came out against that then. There were 38 more applications that were waiting, and just about 10 days ago, the EPA reviewed 31 of them and granted the waivers to all 31. Well, about, I'd say 6 weeks ago or more, I introduced legislation that addresses these RIN waivers. And it says that when there are RIN waivers that are granted by the EPA, those gallons must be added back into the ethanol that would be blended in from other refineries around the country so that the industry doesn't lose the RFS volume standard. And that's the first bill, and that's the one that has the best chance. Second one says this: blend in all of the, over a period of, I believe we set 10 years, to recover all those gallons that were waived by RIN waivers in previous years too, so that all that backlog that's been starved the industry for marketplace gets put back into the market again. That's a lot harder to get that passed, but those bills are out there. You might say they're statements, they are, but I hope we can get at least one of them to become law too. That would help the industry a lot. And I encourage the industry, speak up to the president. It looks to me like the petroleum industry has spent a lot more time in the Oval Office than we have as an industry these days.
And that's kind of the rub there. You know, those bills sound really great, but give me your honest opinion on a scale of 1 to 10. How likely do you think those things are to pass?
Well, the first thing I'd say is who's got a better idea? I don't know who that is. And I talked to the industry about these ideas, and they said, well, you know, we really haven't gotten around to taking a position on it yet. And I said, well, I'm going to introduce this legislation, and then you can figure it out, and we'll have a lot of dialogue. And so whatever the odds are of this, the odds of them being passed or improved every time I introduce legislation, every time I get co-sponsors on it. I'm not particularly optimistic that it's going to be passed, but that isn't always the case. You know, I introduced legislation to get the FDA out of the way so that J.C. Hermstead could receive her treatment. We didn't get that bill to the floor, but the FDA got out of the way right before we brought it to the floor. So they have utility whether or not they're signed into law.
Okay. And we're kind of running a little short on time. I guess my last question would be, you know, kind of goes back to this election coming up. You know, I know that, you know, Randy Feenstra, he's also a really strong, you know, Christian conservative. He has a lot of really strong views. You guys actually kind of have similar views on a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. I guess what separates the two of you in terms of policy and everything, and why you can think that you're a better candidate than he is?
That'd be a good question for Randy, actually, because when I hear his speech, it sounds like his promises are actually my autobiography. The things that I have accomplished and worked on throughout these years are things that he promises to support. He's not taking any issue with any vote I put up, any bill I've introduced, or any philosophical position that I have taken. Not at all. But what is true is that he and all my opponents appear to be election experts. And they do this analysis and they say, well, we don't think Steve King can win an election. But if you look at their record, and in case for Randy, he's never beaten anybody. In any time his name's been on the ballot, there's never been anybody up against him. So it's kind of hard to say you can make a prediction on an election if you've never beaten anybody. And for me, I've never been on the ballot with a free pass, not one time in all the times that I've been there, because, and a big reason for it is, Andy, that this congressional seat, this conservative 4th congressional district in Iowa, it's a strong Republican seat, it's a conservative seat, and if you're going to walk in there and think, well, I'm going to represent these people, I'm not going to make any waves, guess what? You're not going to accomplish anything either. You render yourself essentially a neutered candidate if you're not willing to take some risk. And I said to people when I was nominated for this task, clear back in 2002, you elect me to this job, I will use this seat to move the political center to the right. And I don't think anybody will doubt that's what I have done. And those that say, well, Steve King's more conservative than I am, they need to be reminded that's not the equation. The equation is, where do you want the political center to be? To the left or to the right? Most of them will say, we need to go to the right, not the left. Well, the person that's out here pulling it in that direction is more likely to get it where you want it than the one who's sitting here in the middle not making any waves. Randy Feenstra will never make waves. He has plenty of history of not making waves. Yes, I've made waves, but every one of them have been defending conservative principles, defending the Republican platform. And that's what I get attacked for by the left. And then those establishment folks and globalists and neocons and never-Trumpers, they are uneasy with those principles. They want to be in charge, but they don't really believe in anything.
Okay. Would you debate him?
If he were here right now, I'd debate him. So yes.
If someone organized a debate in our district, would you be interested in participating?
I would say this. I may have to organize it, because one thing I won't do is I won't debate with anybody when there's somebody on the panel that's ever called me a racist. And so that eliminates about 3/4 of the people out there. But start looking around. Let's see who can qualify, and if they do, we'll be able to lay the foundation for a debate, or 2 or 7, as I did with Christy Vilsack. She was really tired of that by the time I got down to the last 2, by the way.